Okay, it's time to begin. Good morning to everybody. This morning, we enter a new section in Isaiah. Isaiah is chapter 36 through 39. This is the one that we have been building up to, the narrative about Hezekiah. The interesting thing about this is what Ahaz went through. Hezekiah faces the same thing. It all begins in the same way. They're at the upper pool where Isaiah first meets with Ahaz concerning the enemies that are threatening him, and then Hezekiah is threatened at the same place. So it's interesting how the accounts are parallel in many respects. The section we're looking at, we label that or call that the book of Hezekiah. And it's like a bridge to enter into the second section. It completes the narrative and the message of the first section, dealing with faith and trusting in God and all that. The Assyrians are going to be no more after chapter 39. But as Isaiah has already alluded to, there's another power rising, and that's the Babylonians. And so this section sort of is the transition to that, because that's the real enemy of Judah during the days after Hezekiah and the other kings that will reign in Judah. But unfortunately, the Babylonians will conquer Judah. And so that tells you that the faith of Hezekiah and his trust in God, the kings that followed, most of them, did not have the same commitment and trust. And so God allowed the Babylonians to take the inhabitants of Jerusalem into captivity and demolish the entire city. So that's the exile. Well, the second part of Isaiah 40 through 55, the backdrop is the exilic period. These are messages to those who are in Babylonian exile. Chapters 56 through 66 of Isaiah is basically the backdrop of that is the return back to Jerusalem. So it's interesting, the background, the historical background is going to shift. We're not going to be told by Isaiah about the Babylonians or Nebuchadnezzar coming to, Jerusalem and conquering it and all that. We have that told for us in other places in the Bible. Isaiah, his ministry seems to come to an end, under Hezekiah. That's the last king that's mentioned. In Isaiah 1:1, the kings of his prophetic ministry are mentioned, and Hezekiah is the last one. So we end the Assyrian, domination. And then after this book of Hezekiah, we're already into the Babylonian exile. So there's a lot of time that has been covered in history, but not covered by Isaiah. So this book of Hezekiah, the parallel, Ahaz and Hezekiah. Now, interestingly enough, Hezekiah wasn't immediately all in for God. He began a restoration movement, but he still had some challenges in his faith, because he was trying to align himself with Egypt and Judah to battle the Assyrians. And you remember Isaiah said, don't rely on Egypt, because Egypt will fail you. Well, see, Egypt was conquered by the Assyrians. But when we begin in chapter 36, The Assyrians have come in to the land of Judah, conquering about 46 states. Their annals indicate that. And they haven't fully subdued totally Egypt. There's still some skirmishes going on. But Sennacherib has sent his military leader to warn the people of Jerusalem and Hezekiah. Don't put your trust in God. Look at the mighty Assyrians. We have conquered all the primary cities and villages and city-states of the land of Judah, your land, and God is obviously not on your side. He's with us. That's the argument that the military leader is going to make to the representatives of Hezekiah. Then there's a skirmish that happens that the Assyrians are involved in, and they leave to go put down the skirmish from the Egyptians, the last hurrah, I suppose you could say. And then a letter is sent to Hezekiah saying, we're coming for you. And that's when he goes in the temple and lays out the letter. But the first interaction, Hezekiah has paid tribute to the Assyrians, vying for time. He's looking to Egypt. He's having the same kinds of temptations, I guess you could say, that his father did. Okay? And Isaiah comes to him just like he did in Ahaz and says, don't fear them. Don't put your trust in the Egyptians. Trust in me. Well, the Assyrians leave for a period of time, but they come back. And when they come back the second time, Hezekiah is fully assured in his faith at this point that he's going to rely on God and trust him. And that's when God intervenes and the Assyrians are conquered by a mysterious, providential inbreaking into history. So that's what's going on in chapters 36 through 39. When we get to chapter 39, what exposes Hezekiah is that when the Assyrians are defeated, it's in a matter of, not very long until they're conquered by the Babylonians. But Hezekiah has already been making friends with the Babylonians, and Isaiah is warning him, don't, be friends, align with the Babylonians. They're going to be the ones that are going to destroy you if you do this. But he opened up the treasury, and he's sort of being friendly with them. So that's the transition to, the next section when they're in captivity, in Babylonian captivity. So Hezekiah is the one, unfortunately, being a good king, that opened the door to the Babylonians. So the real issue that Isaiah is presenting is we have to have a divine king, a perfect king, because these human kings, as good as they can get, like Hezekiah, they end up letting us down. So that's where we are in this book of Hezekiah. Both Ahaz and Hezekiah faced Assyrian brutality. Ahaz, because of his faithlessness, the father of Hezekiah, has allowed the Assyrians, or God has punished the land of Judah, because God has allowed the Assyrians not only to take northern Israel into captivity, but also a lot of the population in Judah into captivity. Because when they conquered those 46 cities in the land of Judah, they took them into captivity, slaughtered them, or whatever. The brutality is being faced by Ahaz and Hezekiah. So we already have, Hezekiah already sees what lack of faith has done to the land of Israel. So, he comes at a time, though he's a good king, he comes at a time when Judah is very weakened. His kingdom is weakened. And from all practical purposes, there's no way that Judah could conquer the Assyrians. There's just no way, unless God intervened. It's kind of like what we talked about last Sunday when we have David and Goliath. You know, we understand the odds, you know, the favor Goliath. But see, faith becomes that unexpected variable that changes the whole dynamic. So, Ahaz's faithlessness brought much harm upon the people in the land of Israel. Hezekiah, Ahaz's son, rejected his father's policy, and he began a restoration movement in the land of Judah. What did he do? Well, he tore down the high places. See, there were high places, pagan altars in the land of Judah. And he went and he tore them down. He's restoring the true worship of God. He's restoring a lot of things that have not been participated in or observed for a long time. So he is leading a restoration movement. And so that's a good thing. God rewards Hezekiah's faith with victory over the Assyrians, but it's important to note this has nothing to do really with Hezekiah and the Assyrians. The point of Isaiah, it's a battle between Ashur, the pagan god of the Assyrians, and Yahweh. That's the theological message. That's the same thing that we saw when the children of Israel came out of Egyptian bondage. It's a battle between the gods of Egypt and Yahweh, the God of Israel. So that's the main issue that's at stake is the warfare that's being presented concerning the gods. So you have the one true God, and then you have these pagan nations that have multiple gods, and God's going to be shown to be the one and only God of heaven and earth. So Ashur is the primary god. There's other gods, Ishtar, other deities that the Babylonians worship, but Ashur is the main pagan god that they serve. Now, what's fascinating about all this, and I know you've heard it, but it's rich to know that the Bible is rooted in real history. Sometimes people come to the Bible and look at it, and they even make the claim that it's fiction, or it's made up by someone, or it's distortion of the facts and all these things. And no, it's not. There's two primary extra biblical resources that have come through the light of archaeology that record the events of what we read in Isaiah and Chronicles and Kings. It doesn't. There's not word for word stuff. It indicates that what Isaiah is reporting is history, actual things, not just a religious message, an illustration that might be made up to encourage faith. And so I wanted to give you an excerpt of one of these reliefs or things that have been discovered and show you what is said by non-biblical people. What I mean by non-biblical people are they're mentioned in the Bible, of course, but the history is written outside of the Bible. These are historical documents of pagan nations. And so we have what's called the Taylor Prism, 690 BC, which describes Sennacherib's siege of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mentioned, Hezekiah, the cities, all of these things are mentioned. Okay? In other words, it corroborates what we read in the Bible. The other one is what's called the bull inscription of Sennacherib. The prism is what they usually did in ancient days. The nations, they would construct a clay prism in cuneiform. They would write the histories of the kings and their campaigns and their victories and all these things. And so we have a number of these from different nations, the annals of the kings. on the one that I'm going to read, a portion of what I'm going to read from comes from under one of the bulls. You know, the bull was a big thing in Babylon. You know, the bull at the gates, and there's inscriptions on the bottom of the bulls. It's interesting to me that everywhere you would go, probably in a city in ancient days, you would read the campaigns or see pictures of the mighty Assyrians. That happened in Egypt. You go everywhere, and there's these reliefs on the walls of the Egyptians and their battle victories and scenes and things of this nature. This is their story, you see, that unites and that tells a story of the Assyrians and the Babylonians. They all had their particular thing. But underneath the bull, there's a section of hardened clay or whatever that has been, discovered, and this is what I'm going to read to you that concerns the historical period of the Assyrians and Jerusalem. This is the inscription of Sennacherib, the one who is the leader of the Assyrians at the time of Hezekiah. He says, I drew near to Ekron. The governors who had rebelled, I slew with the sword. The citizens who had rebelled, I counted as spoil. The rest of them who had not rebelled, I pardoned. Patti, their king, I brought out of Jerusalem and placed on the throne over them. My royal tribute I imposed upon him. As for Hezekiah, the Jew, who had not submitted to my yoke, of his strong walled cities and the cities of their environs, which were numberless, I besieged, I captured, I plundered, as booty I counted. Him, like caged bird in Jerusalem, his royal city, I shut up. Earthworks I threw up about it. His cities, which I plundered, I cut off from his land and gave to the kings of Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gaza. Where's this found? Who are the people of these cities here? You remember? It's the Philistines. They're always at war, and these are the city-states of Philistia. He says, I diminished his land to the former tribute I imposed and laid upon him the giving up of his land as a gift. That Hezekiah, the terrifying splendor of my royalty overcame him. And the Arabs, and as he picked up troops whom he had brought into Jerusalem, his royal city, ran away. With 30 talents of, this should be gold, by the way, 80 talents of silver and all kinds of treasure from the palace, he sent his daughters, his palace women, his male and female singers to Nineveh and dispatched his messenger to pay tribute. So there was a time in which Hezekiah was trying to placate Sennacherib, and he took gold and everything to give, to placate him, to do it as tribute, so the Assyrians would consider them, friendly and submissive and all that. So that's coming from outside of the Bible. Now, why is this important? Why is this significant? Well, number one, it tells me that the Bible's rooted in history. It's corroborated by outside biblical material. Even if I didn't have that, I'd still believe it. But isn't it nice to know, through these discoveries and things, that which is affirming the biblical narrative? It also shows you the arrogance of the Assyrians. This is exactly what God's been saying about the king of Assyria and the Assyrians themselves, who trust in their gods. You remember in David's class on Wednesday night in regard to Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, filled with pride. Look at all that I've done. Look at this. And God humbled him. They're really full of themselves, the kings of these ancient nations. And from all, standpoints, why not flaunt it if you did it? They defeated all these nations, and you got this puny little, city, Jerusalem, Hezekiah, and he's making a stand, he's doing this, and the way that the Assyrians treat him and talk about him is just, this guy is really out of his mind to try to stand against the mighty Assyrians. He talks about how Hezekiah was overwhelmed by his royal glory. And probably the people were. When the army came and they began to do, military, encroachment in, and the people were seeing this, I'm sure there was a lot of fear. Just like Ahaz, his father, and the people had a lot of fear back then. So, Hezekiah became king of Judah in 715 BC, when he was only 25 years old. He reigned for 29 years. Though he had a sort of a shaky beginning, he came into his faith and trust in God from a political point of view, military point of view, the strategy of the nation, and his confidence that will exude, we'll see, in his trust in God. The Bible compliments him about his character and his trust. He did what was good, right, and true before the Lord his God. His success is attributed to one thing: faith. 2 Kings 18, verse 5, he trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him. That's quite a testimony of an individual. So, here's an example of the possibilities before a person when they have faith in God. I think that's the real message. Not only is it a national message, but it's an individual message, because the individuals, the citizens of the kingdom, are encouraged to maintain trust in God. They're called the remnant, the seed, who trust and have faith. They will be preserved. They will come home. Now, that's where we are with Hezekiah at this time. Any comments or observations about this introductory stuff to the book of Hezekiah? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the first people that seem to be condemned from Isaiah were the leaders. It trickles down from the leaders. The leaders are corrupt and all this. It seems to influence a lot of people. But there are those who remain faithful to God despite what the leaders do. But it's important for leaders to demonstrate faithfulness. What do you think about the extra biblical material? Does that interest you at all? Do you find that interesting? Faith building? I don't know. This is sort of the kind of information that you can use and come to mind when people question the historical reality of Scripture. There's a lot of stuff that corroborate both Old Testament and New Testament. This is just a little fraction of what's out there. I've got a book, it's pretty thick, that has a picture, translation, and everything that, connects with the Bible and extra biblical material. It's fascinating. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. And it's not that these things are just kind of like icing on the cake, having cooperation. But it's not necessary to have it, for we know the Bible is inspired and true. Now, one of the things that critics do is they'll admit things about the history and all that and what the Bible says, but they'll reinterpret. They'll seek to find contradictions or various things, and they will put them against each other as if they don't cooperate. What else can they do? They're not going to admit that these things are supporting the biblical material, because that sort of puts a nail in their coffin. So there is a motive, and there's a reason why there's such a push against the historicity of the Bible. Because if the Bible's true, you see, then that says something about them. So you kind of think, why would people spend their lives doing this? Well, I can't, I don't know what's all inside a person's mind, but I know one of the things is they don't want to believe that it's true. So it can't be true. The assumption is the Bible can't be true, and so there's already a preposition that they have, a presumption that guides their study, and I think they filter out things that would help them see. But if your presumption is that the Bible is fake, then everything that would corroborate can't be really true. The Bible, there's got to be other things that are affecting the lack of history in Scripture. And so you always have these things on the History Channel and things of that nature that are constantly coming on to try to discredit things or try to explain things from what they say a scientific or historical way. Well, this right here is pretty solid in the annals of history. Okay, let's go to Isaiah 36, the text. This begins the first threat. The letter is not given at this time that Hezekiah will receive and go to God in prayer. This is a direct threat. The Assyrians are engaged in some skirmishes, okay? And so the military leader is sent to Hezekiah to threaten him and tell them to surrender. And his speech is marvelous. I mean, I know he's a pagan and everything, but the way he presents his position is well done. And the only thing is, there's lots of error and deception in his words, but he is very skilled. He is a highly educated and skilled individual. Not only does he talk Aramaic, which is the diplomatic language of the land, anything that's negotiated among the diplomats, it's done through Aramaic because it's the language of the land, of the nations. It's the political language. He even knows Hebrew, and which shows you that he's very educated and smart concerning the Jews and is able to speak their language as well, which is impressive. And he makes it known in his threat to Hezekiah. So Isaiah 36, verse 1 says, "Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of the Assyrians, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them." We have already read his annals concerning that. "And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem to King Hezekiah with a large army. And he stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway of the fuller's field. the exact same place where Ahaz was when he was hearing about the threats during the Syro-Ephraimitic War. The North Israel and Syria wanted Judah to align with them to fight against the Assyrians. So we have the same thing. It's interesting, providentially, how these things are occurring structurally in almost an identical type of way. Same structure. Then Eliakim and the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to him. So Sennacherib is taking over the land of Judah, fighting with the Egyptians who will come up and have a little skirmish, but he defeats them. And so he's involved in these military campaigns, and so he sends his military leader to go and warn Jerusalem, Hezekiah, King Hezekiah. Now, the place is similar. Isaiah 7:3 is where Isaiah met Ahaz at the conduit. This is the main water line into Jerusalem. Okay, it would be natural for a king expecting to do battle to ensure that the water and what they need is undamaged and is working properly. Okay, they want to defend that because that's vital to their survival. That's how the water comes in to Jerusalem. Now, we have then Rabshakeh said to them, "Say now to Hezekiah." Now, Hezekiah sends 3 delegates. This is like a delegation. You have the political leader, delegate that's coming, and then the 3 from Hezekiah, and they're coming to talk, negotiate and engage in, conversation with one another. You might recall the 3 that are listed. Eliakim is referred to as the one over Hezekiah's household. If you remember back in Isaiah 22, verses 15 through 22, God said, "I will remove Shebna, who was over the household of Hezekiah." And Hilkiah, what's his name? Not Hilkiah. Eliakim will take his place. So it's already happened, which is kind of interesting. Just little things like that show you connections of what's been said in Isaiah concerning the court of Hezekiah. So, say now to Hezekiah, verse 4, "Thus says the great king, the king of Assyria." The great king is a title. That's how they looked at themselves. Every king was the great king. When the Assyrians are in power, the great king of Assyria. When the Babylonians are in power, the great king of the Babylonians. There was always this similarity of the type of language that's used to elevate the leader of the kingdom that's dominant at the time. Now, I want you to listen and read the speech that he gives. Okay? It's easy to see the theme of it and also his argumentation of how he threatens and approaches Hezekiah's delegates. And you also have to understand that there are lots of Jews up on the wall of Jerusalem, okay, that are watching what's going on. Everybody is seeing this meeting take place. And you'll see in a moment how the military leader stops talking directly to the 3 delegates of Hezekiah and starts talking to the men on the wall. So he says, "What is this confidence that you have? I say, your counsel and strength for the war are only empty words. Whatever Hezekiah's been telling you, whatever the priests, whatever the prophets, whoever they are, who've been telling you that trust in God, be confident, it's only blah, 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 empty words. Okay? In other words, you're foolish to have such confidence to stand against the mighty king of the Assyrians. Now, on whom do you rely? Now, understand, this is coming from a pagan military leader. As readers, we understand upon whom Hezekiah is going to rely and the whom that will deliver God's people because of faith. But from a pagan standpoint, see, they lump the God of Israel with the pagan court, of gods, the pantheon of gods who are at war with one another. In other words, every ancient kingdom has their God, has their territory. And so it's always a battle, if you please, between gods. Whose God is stronger? Well, right now, the God of the Assyrians seems to be stronger than all the other gods that have tried to fight against the encroachment of the Assyrians. He says, behold, you rely on the staff of this crushed reed, even on whom? See Egypt there? He knows that Hezekiah has been friendly with the Egyptians to form, a strong alliance. The military leader knows that. The Assyrians are doing battle with the Egyptians even as we speak and are losing. And so he says, the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who rely on him. God said through Isaiah, don't depend on Egypt. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away and has said to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? He's confused about what Hezekiah has been doing. He knows that Hezekiah has been going throughout in his restoration campaign, taking down what? High places, idol worship. The military or the Assyrians interpret that as showing weakness. They believe the more places that are attributed to God, the more glory that God gets. So they look at Hezekiah's actions as demonstrating that Hezekiah isn't depending on God. In fact, he's destroying the altars in your land. This doesn't make sense to the Assyrians. It's against how they perceive the spiritual world. But see, we know that what Hezekiah is doing is elevating the one true God by taking down the idolatry that exists in the land of Judah. But he's going to play on that, the military leader. He's aware of this, but he is not understanding what Hezekiah has done. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord, it is not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away, and has said to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar, this one in Jerusalem, concerning the temple and the altar in Jerusalem. Now, therefore, come make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you, notice this, what he kind of throws in. I will give you 2,000 horses, and if you are able on your part to set riders on them, see the sarcasm here? I'll give you two, and you probably can't ride them anyway, but I'll give you those gifts. How then can you repulse one official of the least of my master's servant and rely on Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? So he's saying, you ought to be trusting and relying in us, not Egypt. Have I now come up without the Lord's approval against this land to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Well, Isaiah has indicated that this threat is real, that God is using the Assyrians to punish. But see, the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, all the Assyrians believe, since they have come into Judah without any real opposition, God is on their side. That would even mean, since they're conquering the land of Judah, where the God of Judah resides, then the Lord, their God, is on our side. He's told us to go. Look, this is evidence. We have been victorious all over your land, and you alone are standing. And you're trusting in the Egyptians? You are foolish. So, he continues, verse 11. Then Eliakim and Shebna and Joah said to Rabshakeh, speak now to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it, and do not speak with us in Judean, that is Hebrew, in the hearing of the people who are on the wall. In other words, the three are saying, let's talk between us privately. Okay, let's negotiate all this. Don't speak in Hebrew where everybody can hear, okay, because they know if the people hear what he's saying, the people are going to be demoralized, discouraged. Now, but Rabshakeh said, has my master sent me only to your master and to you to speak these words, and not to the men who sit on the wall, doomed to eat their own dung and drink their own urine with you? That's pretty explicit, isn't it? So, verse 13, Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in Judean and said, hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you. Nor let Hezekiah make you trust the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. The city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me, and come out to me, and eat each of his vine and each of his fig tree, and drink each of his water of his own cistern. There's the promise. We don't know if it's going to be true or not. Probably not, if it were to happen. But he says you'll have peace if you surrender to the Assyrians. Until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and new wine, and a land of bread and vineyards. You don't want to stay here. You want to come into Assyria. Beware that Hezekiah does not mislead you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any one of the gods of the nations delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Is that a rhetorical question? The Israelites look around and no, he's conquered every city just about in Judah. He's taken North Israel into captivity. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of the Sepharvaim? And when have they delivered Samaria from my hand? Who among all the gods of these lands have delivered their land from my hand, that the Lord would deliver Jerusalem from my hand? See the sarcasm? I mean, it's a great speech if you're trying to scare somebody, and you lay out your arguments, and it looks pretty good, formidable, and that's the point. There's no way out except for what? Faith in God. When things look impossible, faith is the variable that makes it possible. Impossible, the way it looks. But they were silent and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was, Hezekiah said, do not answer him. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him the words of the Rabshakeh. So the clothes torn usually accompanies mourning, and I'm sure they're discouraged and hopeless when they go and see Hezekiah. So this is the first engagement. They're going to be called, the Rabshakeh is going to be called away. The Assyrians will go away for a minute and put down the Egyptians, and then they'll send a letter to Hezekiah. It'll be the second confrontation that he'll have. Okay, that's it.